Okay. Good morning. I'll be chairing today's meeting, Councillor Jill Heesom, in the absence of Councillor Peters. So thank you all for coming. So I'll just go through the agenda now. So we do have apologies.
Thank you, Chair. The apologies are from Councillor Peters, Councillor Robertson, who sent his substitute, Councillor Taylor, to the meeting, Councillor Kropski, Councillor Merrick, Councillor Loughran, her substitute, Councillor Barron, who's ill today, so can't attend, and Mr. Elliott.
Are there any declarations of interest? No? Okay, thank you. There have been no decisions published by the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner, and there have been no questions to the PFCC from members of the public. So we'll now go into agenda item 5, proposed fire and rescue budget and Precept 25-26. So I can ask the Commissioner to present that.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Morning, panel. This will feel a little bit like Groundhog Day because we met only a week ago to talk about the police budgets, and the environment is similar. Just before I get started, very pleased to have with me again Louise, my Chief Executive, Dave, my Deputy, and David Greensmith, who is the S151 Officer for Fire and Rescue, and he will, I'm sure, assist me in answering your questions and setting out the context of this. The proposals from me this year are that we ask the public to pay an extra 10 pence a week, which is £5 a year for a Band-E property, taking the Band-E contribution to just under £92 towards their fire and rescue service. That's the most I can ask the public to increase by without having a public consultation, a referendum on that council tax precept. I understand some of the parts of the country where they're not restricted by the referendum, notably in areas where there is a mayor, are moving some considerable fire and rescue increases this year in order to meet some of the challenges that we're meeting here in Staffordshire as well. For context, there's a budget of around £52 million this year, of which just under 72.5% is paid for by local taxes. That's 65% council tax and 7.5% business rates. So this is primarily a local service. Always has been to some degree, but I think it's important just to remind ourselves what the local community want, expect and need is also, I think, more important on the basis that they are providing the core funding for the service. Regrettably, having got ourselves into a tremendous position financially compared with a number of other services, having saved or delivered savings of about £1 million in the last 2 or 3 years, unfortunately this settlement from government is poor. There was a special services grant given to fire and rescue services for some years, which has now been removed. That is virtually £1 million straight off our £52 million budget. In many other areas, that's been reallocated to the top tier council, and I'm sure that where those councils have are the authority for fire and rescue, that might find its way back into fire and rescue. It might not. I hope it does, but it can't do here because we've got a separate arrangement. The funding provided in the central grant for the national insurance increase has been confirmed by government across the country as about half what is actually required. Here in Staffordshire, I believe we're going to get 52% of the increase covered by government, not the other 48. That amounts to about £275,000. I think I'm getting a nod from David, so I got that one right. These are significant challenges, and it means, folks, that my £1.8 million additional council tax contribution is largely going to try and keep the service where it is. Very little by way of reinvestment, and there's already been a look at the capital programme and some other projects that were lined up under the a new eye, which is how do we get through the next 4 or 5 years when we're facing uncertainty around the economies for the country and a spending review in the summer, which I do not think is going to be in the interests of local public services. So having saved £1 million, we've got to save another £1 million in the next few years, and I am proposing here that we use £2.5 million of reserves to get us through the next 3 years in addition to the £1 million. Now that doesn't deplete our reserves, but it does mean we're using them for the purpose they were put there for. And I would ask members just to note, we've got an eye to the future as well. There is investment in equipment where it needs to be. We talked briefly about electric vehicles the other day. There's an opportunity to pick that up again today from the fire and rescue perspective. But we've also got an eye to the PFI contracts that are coming due on a lot of our estate in 2035. Now that's some way down the line, but particularly members who are aware of PFI arrangements with schools, academies, etc. It's better to be thinking about that well in advance rather than at the last minute in terms of planning and making contingency. The capital programme is increasing over the next 5 years. The requirement for borrowing to cover that is also increasing, but that's primarily because of the extra cost of capital of borrowing now. Disappointed in one or two respects. The increase in council tax across the county is not what was forecast a couple of years ago in terms of growth. House building is not progressing at quite the same pace it was for a while, but it's still a growth of 1%, which is welcome. And of course, all those people would want to contribute to their local services. The collection, however, of council tax has gone backwards this year. And I would urge all of you back in your councils to ask that everything is being done to collect council tax where it is affordable and can be. I'm quite surprised to see that slip this year. Things are difficult, but they were probably more difficult in the previous 2 years when the collections were increasing. And that, of course, affects everybody in terms of the amounts that are available. So that's the background. We've got a terrific fire and rescue service. The HMI report this year was really one of the best in the country, just showing the progress they continue to make. They have good estate, wonderful staff, wonderful firefighters, and my ambition is to really maintain those numbers as far as possible. Whether we can do that or not is going to very much depend on the spending review of government in the summer. At this point, the savings, the additional council tax and our approach will hopefully mean that we can maintain the service levels where they are. Chair, with your permission, could I just ask David if I've missed anything, or he'd like to put all that in a more succinct fashion?
Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning, Chair, and good morning, members of the panel. So I think the Commissioner's pulled together a number of key points to set me up really nicely, just to build on one or two of the key areas, if I may do that. In terms of the commentary I'm going to give now, just really surrounds, there are 4 papers, obviously, that are in front of you. The Commissioner's gone through some of the key headlines within the budget and the medium-term financial strategy paper, but we've also got the Treasury and Management strategy, the capital strategy, and also the reserve paper that really just builds and provides detail for the panel that underpins the key information that's contained within the main paper. I guess I sat here a year ago presenting what was really quite probably the most positive budget I'd set in many, many years. In fact, overall we got a balanced MTFS position. We got a small gap that we were predicting for 25-6, but But overall, a really good position that we were setting out a year ago. And unfortunately, as the Commissioner has outlined, the settlement for next year is now going to present us with a number of new challenges, because basically we're in a significantly worse financial outlook as a result of the settlement. And of course, I think, panel members, it doesn't help having a single year settlement, and that makes it far more challenging and far more difficult for us to actually predict how this is going to play out into the medium term. Now, I know the government are now proposing a 2-year settlement for 26-7 and 27-8, and I think we'll all recognise that is welcomed, and that will really help us plan into the future a little bit better if we've got a little bit more certainty around what the numbers are going to look like as we move forward. In terms of the settlement that we received this year, as part of the government announced when the settlement was released that, and I'll read this, it was taking difficult decisions to improve the value for money and efficiency of the grant funding we provide. We will repurpose a number of grants in order to target more funding towards authorities that have weak tax bases and high levels of need and service demand. Now, obviously, the fire and rescue sector doesn't fall into any of those categories, so overall, the settlement for Staffordshire Fire and Rescue resulted in £900,000 worth of lost funding from the Special Services Grant and also from the funding guarantee, which, as the government has said, has now been reallocated to other areas of the public sector. And these have been labelled sort of recovery grants, but there's been a considerable amount of funding that's been reallocated to other areas. So when we also add on the fact that the airwave grants now been removed as well, there's broadly £1 million worth of income or funding that the authority loses for next year and every year into the medium term. It's also worth noting as well that that's not just Staffordshire. The fire and rescue sector has lost over 20 million in funding as part of this reallocation. So in order to compensate for that loss of funding, what have the government done? Well, one of the things that they've done is they've increased the referendum limit for council tax, and they've increased it to £5, as also said by the Commissioner. So what that does, that increases the council tax by 10 pence per week, increasing a Band D up to £91.77. And I'll just also build on a little bit in terms of what the Commissioner said. So the budget also includes the national insurance increase. So for Staffordshire Fire and Rescue, that's about £575,000 for 25/6, of which we've now had the grant confirmation that came through actually at the end of last week. So in total, we are going to be funded 53%. So we're losing 47% of that overall position, but it's still over £270,000 worth of pressure that we're seeing as a direct result of that. And I guess to put that into context, that's almost a 1% council tax increase in itself, just to cover that significant funding challenge that's arising from the NIC increase. In addition to that, of course, we've also seen the council tax base hasn't increased to the level that we anticipated it was going to, and also some of the billing authorities, not all, but some of the billing authorities have had difficulty collecting the council tax this year. So overall, we've got a council tax deficit of £87,000, and that's on, we can see that on Appendix 4 and 5 of the main report. So to put that into context, members of the panel, what we're seeing is overall our funding is going up by £1.9 million, but our net costs, so that's our costs less the income that we've lost, our net costs are going up by £3.1 million, which has resulted into that budget gap for next year and the requirement that we're going to have to use reserves for 25/6 and also into 26/7. Now, I think it's important as well the panel know that deficit does include that full council tax increase, and any reduction on that would result, well, for every 1% of council tax increase below that, there will be an additional £300,000 increase in that gap as we would move forward. So in order to address the financial position into the medium term, the Commissioner has challenged the service to deliver £1 million worth of recurring savings by 28-29, which will result, I'm pleased to say, in a balanced medium-term financial position by that time. But of course, in order to deliver that, the next phase of the transformation work must commence, and the Deputy Chief Fire Officer, Glyn Lugiany, will be building on the really good work that's been done to date in order to start and deliver the work streams required for that saving. So the settlement and budget proposals results in the authority needing, and I always just mention this, to access the earmarked future funding reserve. So this is a reserve that has been set aside for this purpose, but we will be needing to access that saving, that reserve, in order to balance the position as we move forward. So the reserve strategy in MTFS over the full period of the 5 years utilises £1.3 million worth of reserve. So there's a high use in the early years, and then we're recovering that with a surplus in the final 2 years. And members, you can see the impact of the reserves within Appendix 2 and of course within the reserve strategy report. I think it's also important if members can note the budget assumptions within paragraphs 45 and really just, I guess, just note that additional pressures may arise for next year and beyond. We've still got pressures around pay. We've still got pressures around pension contributions. And these are both areas that are nationally negotiated and not in the control of the Commissioner. So I just want to mention capital briefly. In terms of the capital, the full programme for next year is scheduled within Appendix 9 at 5.8 million, with 4.1 million for 26-7 and 3.4 million for 27-28. The prudential indicators are included within the capital strategy, and I think if the panel should note that funding for capital spending, as the Commissioner pointed out, is resulting in an increased capital financing requirement into the medium term. I think it's also worth noting as well the National Fire Chiefs Council and the Home Office put forward a bid to Treasury for capital funding for the fire and rescue sector for 25-6, but unfortunately the bid was unsuccessful, and I think the fire and rescue sector does have some issues with capital funding now into the medium term. So Chair, I'm going to close now and just ask the panel to note the recommendations within the main report, if that's okay. Within the report we've got for A to L. Please, of course, note the budget proposals presented to the panel for a revenue budget of 51.996 million, which is, of course, aligned to the provisional local government finance settlement, which has now been finalised with the final settlement being released last week. So it does include a proposed increase in Band D council tax of 5.85% or £5 or 10 pence per week, increasing that Band D to £91.77 in line with the referendum limit. So Chair, I'm happy to take questions and would please ask the panel to note the statement I've made on the robustness of this budget and the reserves position which is required by Section 25 of the Local Government Act within paragraphs 53 and 54 of the main report. So thank you, happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you for that. Before I throw it open for questions, I've got a comment and a couple of queries. I appreciate it's a challenging process to set a precept, but I do have to admit I was startled to see that it was 5.85%, which we've not really seen with the fire service before. But my questions are, the Service Transformation Programme on page 15 of the report, it's been successful in proving itself, and a savings target has been set, and I can see that 0.3 million is pay. How will that impact on staff and the service? And the other one is the £1 million over 4 years. Have you any plans for the remaining 600,000? That's my questions. Do you want me to throw it open to questions before you answer those?
We'll take those first, please, Chair. Sorry, page 15.
On the report where it's the Service Transformation Programme. Oh, on this one it's 15.
We've got different numbers.
Right.
And apologies that we have. Yes, there's going to be the transformation. Staffordshire's pretty lean. It really is. The £1 million we've delivered in recent years has been looking at every opportunity without having to consider staff and firefighter numbers. I think this is a reflection that we're now reaching the limit of that. My expectation is that that's not going to be impacting any roles immediately, but it isn't something that we can take out of the programme over the medium term. It's going to depend very much on the settlement mid-year. Where we need to make savings on pay, it's going to be by virtue of not filling vacancies, perhaps not recruiting to the numbers that we have before. We've had a pretty robust process around transformation, which I'm reviewing again now. We're going to have a quarterly meeting with the Fire and Rescue Service to look at the detail of this. My office will be involved in the decisions because if they're affecting personnel, I want to be very close to the process around that and to understand the operational impact. And very much along the same lines as our conversation around policing the other day, if there are vacancies that aren't filled, well, what does that mean for the public? What options, what choices, and what is the risk associated with those? I'm afraid it's the reality that it is not possible to continue to make the savings we need to without looking in some form at roles. And sorry, Chair, your second question was?
There doesn't seem to be any explanation about the £600,000 in the 4-year programme going forward and the savings. How are you going to do that? What the money's going to?
Okay. David, would you mind starting on that and I'll pick up?
So thank you. Yeah. So Glyn Lucian, who chairs the Transformation Board, the board's now been stood up, and there are a number of work streams that are being developed as part of that work. So we have not got all of the work streams actually started yet in order to deliver the full saving programme. We've got a number of outline areas that will be reviewed and will be developed over the next few months. So we've not all the plans aren't actually fixed yet. They're not all firm. A number are being worked through, and obviously we'll have to go through the process, with members of the board in order to develop the work streams and make sure that the savings that we plan to deliver are robust, realistic, and are not going to affect service delivery as part of those savings.
Chair, if I may, I think it's worth acknowledging that we weren't expecting to get £1 million kicked out of our budget, and we only had that confirmed just before Christmas. So we are having to go again at a savings programme that's proved to be really robust and delivered what it needs to over the last few years. We're looking at stuff that is difficult. We're looking at roles, we're looking at stations, we're looking at shifts as part of that mix. What I wouldn't want to do today is to jump into saying that we're going to take option A, B, C or D before we've really worked through those proposals and understood the risk. But we've had a comprehensive piece of work done over the last 12 months to consider the impact of various options, and that will absolutely inform the decisions going forward, because it's important that we understand the risk and the implication of any decisions that we need to make to keep the service safe.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Is there anybody else that would like to ask a question? Mr Bowen.
Thank you, Chair. Adrian Bowen, independent member. If I could carry on talking about that savings that you talked about, an unexpected requirement to save £1 million, which is serious money. 2 or 3 points, please. The 300,000, which is pay, I assume that means, therefore, some reduction in manning levels. Could I say manning? Person levels, or whatever I should say. Hopefully that will be by natural wastage rather than redundancy, hopefully. And I'm curious, actually, as to what the manning levels have been for the fire over the last few years? Don't have to know that now, but has there been a steady reduction in that? Have we levelled off? If we lose 5 or 6 people, proportionately, how important is that? You know, out of a staff of 1,000, it's nothing. Out of a staff of 50, it's a lot. So I'd be curious about that. And also, we talk about the savings earlier. I haven't got it in front of me now, but the savings proportion has gone down from something like 9% this year. I've lost it now, I'm sorry, to apologise. Total reserves available this year are, 9 million, and by 2026, 27, 5.8. So that's quite a serious drop. 9 million looks high proportionately, which I'm curious about, but it drops almost by a half over the next 3 or 4 years. So your thoughts on that, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Bone. It's exactly the right question, and that's what the reserves are there for, to manage in times of need. More importantly, they would allow us to be flexible and accommodate what you call natural changes. In fact, quite a significant proportion of the service will be reaching retirement age in the next few years. So planning around when people are naturally going to leave is an important part of the workforce planning that we're doing right now. What we're likely to be doing is not recruiting up to the levels that we might have wanted to. In some cases, that might mean a reduction, but we're not talking significant numbers. David might be better than me, not because he's older, but he's been around this scene a bit longer, to just explain where we are numbers-wise in terms of the recent past. I know in the last few years, our numbers have been particularly healthy, and we've had no trouble recruiting firefighters to our target.
Yeah, so in terms of, if we look at the operational workforce, so in terms of our whole-time workforce, the numbers have been stable for a number of years, so we've not seen any reductions in our crewing levels that we've seen within our whole-time or our day shift station. So that's been pretty static. I think the success really has been around on-call recruitment, and we've had a number of initiatives and been really successful in actually increasing our number of on-call staff. So I think we're about 27 heads up, FTE up on call than we were a year ago. So I think that's been really successful. But we have not seen, and there will be, I think I'm safe to say that there will be at the moment no reductions in operational staff as part of that £1 million worth of savings that we're looking at delivering at the moment. Of course, I think it's fair to say if the 2-year settlement that we get for 26/7 and 27/8 incorporates significant further reductions in funding, then we won't be able to say that, and there will be some more difficult options that we'll be presenting to the Commissioner around delivering further savings beyond that. But I think it's important just to recognise that overall staffing levels have been steady within the whole time and have been increasing within our on-call.
Councillor Atkins.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, one of the main, or the main budget item is staff costs. And clearly, if you're going to be, reducing costs, then obviously it may impact on staffing. So what I want to ask about is, will the transformation plan again be looking at the size of crews on vehicles? What about the role of firefighters in terms of the Falls programme, which you're doing alongside the NHS? And also, of course, with fewer fires, there's clearly a lot of preventative work carried out by firefighters. So how might the transformation programme impact on those 3 areas?
Thank you, Councillor. The key there, I think, is the prevention side. and we're just a few weeks away from the next report and government response to the Grenfell accident. I think it's likely to see an even greater emphasis on prevention, building protection, possibly more regulation coming back to the fire service. We're yet to see. If that's the case, it has to come with the funding to retain the numbers, because they're going to be even more important. I was delighted this year to see the number of incidents had reduced. I think one or two people in the media saw that as somehow a negative. No, the job of fire and rescue is to prevent and protect fires, not to be going to them. We want fewer and fewer fires, and we want to be at them sooner. In terms of manning, the service is extremely comfortable with the intention to get 5 firefighters on every appliance where we can. Where we can't, 4 on hold time and 3 on call. There are no plans to go beyond that, and in fact the programme to get on-call firefighters running in 3s occasionally adds to the cost. It doesn't reduce them, because we are mobilising them more often, going to more incidents, getting there sooner, supporting the other teams there. So that is not a cost-driven decision. It's quite the opposite, actually. It's a safety and reducing the risk for the public and the other fire teams. That's the driver for that decision. There are other places running in 2s at the moment, some neighbouring places running in 2s for certain types of responses. It's perfectly safe to do so, but it's not in our plans at the moment, certainly not in terms of a budget focus. Prevention will stay where it is, and thank you for mentioning the NHS. That's been another tremendous year with falls response and also returning people back to home. I'm really keen that we do more of that. It actually generates income, not a great deal, but it pays for itself. And most importantly, it is massively valuable to the public purse in terms of reducing costs on the NHS, as well as keeping people, where possible, out of hospital. So if we could expand that, I would love to, and I would love for the Trust to be coming to us and saying, how can we do that? I would also like for the Trust to enter into some conversations with us on, when I say the Trust, I mean the ICB, the NHS commissioners. I would like them to enter into conversations with us about our capacity to be first responders as well. At the moment, the ask of the fire service is for considerable additional training that they quite frankly don't need. And I think there's a way in which we can work more closely with the NHS in terms of reducing their ambulance demand as well. So that's a bit of a target for me in the next 2 or 3 years, to broker those conversations and see if we can further develop fire and rescue into a more expansive service. If we can, then there will be potentially more people working in fire and rescue, and that's where I'd like it to be, because they do a damn good job.
I'll just come back on a couple of things. Maybe you could explain how exactly working with the NHS generates money, because I don't understand the process. And secondly, when you talk about more regulation, presumably you're talking about building regulation rather than regulation of the fire service.
I hope so. I certainly expect building regulation, but process, planning process, approvals. It may mean that fire and rescue are involved in signing off building designs in a way that they haven't been in recent years, because that was a shift away from fire and rescue into local building control. So I think we're going to see a whole raft of stuff. There's very likely to be a move of fire and rescue from the Home Office back into local government, which will get it closer to the planning and the housing and the commercial property developing, which is a good thing, I think, although detaches it from the community safety picture. And the rumours are we probably have a dedicated minister for fire and rescue as well, which I think is a good thing around that safety angle. People have an expectation that Grenfell is a step change, as it already has been, quite frankly. But it will also mean investment in equipment, skills, and various other things as well. So, Yeah, in terms of general regulation, I hope so, but at the moment we're seeing more and more regulation in the last few months. It is the nature of this particular government to try and direct things from the centre and write the rules. That isn't my natural position. We need the rules that match the requirement, and we can have professionals making decisions. But
I think it is a government focus on safety.
it should be focused on safety, but that doesn't necessarily mean regulation. It doesn't mean tying organisations up in knots and red tape. And sorry, Charlotte, what was your point about the NHS at the start?
I just didn't understand the process by which you make money from helping the NHS.
Yes.
How does that work?
Yeah. Well, they pay us to do the job. That's the key. It's a commissioned service, effectively. Great value for them.
It's by call out, or I mean, the number of places you go to, you're paid by the call out, or you're paid for the annual service, or how does it work?
I believe it's an annual arrangement. David's got a bit more detail there.
Yeah, so in terms of the arrangement, so we've got separate agreements for Falls Respond and Home from Hospital. So we go through a negotiation process to make sure that all of the services are fully funded over a period of time, whether that be a 6, a 9 or a 12-month period. It varies depending on the renegotiation. I think, unfortunately, yeah, we're always looking at a maximum of a 12-month window at any one time. We'd like, obviously, to have this as business as usual. But at the moment, obviously, we make sure it's fully funded. And if that funding ceased, then obviously we would have to cease providing both of those provisions, which would be clearly very disappointing.
What sort of money are we talking about? I mean, is it a significant amount? Is it a tiny amount as far as the budget is concerned?
So it depends what you define as a material amount. No, it's not a significant amount. So they're paying for a crew of people and a vehicle to provide that service. So it's not a significant amount of money, but I guess it is it's an additional outlay from the NHS to provide that service. So we need to make sure that we're demonstrating and delivering value for that funding. But we can provide I can provide some details if you need to see that.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I think I heard earlier that we're expecting firefighter crew levels to remain constant. I know, for example, across the Lichfield district, we currently have no whole-time appliances. So are we expecting that level of crewing to remain?
That's very much the ambition, but I'm afraid until we see the future funding, it can't be guaranteed today. So we're looking at crewing, shifts, total numbers, and potentially station numbers. But as I say, this is not at the moment necessary. It will be, unless the funding situation turns round. And this is not, by any means, the conversations that are taking place in some other fire and rescue services which are not in this good position that we'd established, and they're talking about large numbers of changes. We're talking about making very, very pragmatic decisions based on risk, if and when we have to.
Sorry, can I just reply to your question? So in terms of Lichfield, so Lichfield's a day shift station, so we have got guaranteed crews during the day, but not of the evening. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, sorry, I was referring to the district, the Lichfield district.
Councillor William. Oh.
Sorry, Chair, just if I may, this distinction between a 24-hour crewing, in other words, where firefighters are there through the night, they run shifts through the night, that is not the case across the whole of the county. Lichfield's an example where we've got a day crew. Most of the incidents occur during the day time, not at night. And at night, it's the support of other crews from neighbouring areas, either whole-time or on-call crews. And that's been working very successfully in Lichfield for a number of years.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, I've just been listening. So I hear that you've repeatedly blamed government funding decisions and some policy uncertainty for some of the challenges that are facing the Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service. However, despite these concerns, from reading the papers, there seems to be no long-term workforce plan, no clear commitment on firefighter numbers, and no strategic vision beyond that next budget cycle. While you cannot control central government policy, you do control local planning and decision making. And given that I heard today that firefighter retirements are increasing and the financial pressures are not going to go away, why hasn't there been a long-term plan already been developed to safeguard emergency response and public safety?
Thank you, Councillor. There absolutely has been, and it's been based on our expected funding. We haven't expected fire and rescue, which is one of the fundamental local services, to be cut. £1 million off a £50 million budget is not insignificant, was not expected. It's to do with pay rises that are negotiated nationally and not covered nationally. It's to do with national insurance increases that are agreed nationally and not covered nationally. It's about your residents, my constituents, our council taxpayers, paying for national policy decisions. That's the situation. There's no getting away from it.
So, yeah, I understand that. So that may be true, but that still doesn't stop us planning for the future. And other fire services have those same issues and uncertainties.
I regret to say the rescue services are in a far worse position than us, and they've been making those choices in prior years, and they're going to have to make them plus as a result of this settlement, because it's not just Staffordshire, it's the whole sector's been given a kick. We do have a plan, as I said to you before. We've been working at, for over a year now, detail about what options. They're what I would call unpalatable options that I've required the service to consider. And they include things I would absolutely not want to do, which is to reduce firefighter numbers, look at shifts, and potentially look at stations. Those are things I do not want to do, but now we're having to. And we have a set of options which we'll be working through in the next few months to understand where we're going, should that spending review in the summer not set fire and rescue up as a sustainable service going forward. By the way, for me, that is not just about funding the existing provision. It is about that wider potential for fire and rescue, building safety, road safety. Let's make their fire and rescue statutorily engaged in response to climate change, flooding, etc., which it is not at the moment, and fund it accordingly. And let's see where services like fire and rescue can assist the NHS, because it's better value for money if they do. If those things could be done, then we're growing our fire and rescue service in terms of local community safety, and not ever more asking it to do a core job with less resources. There's real potential for fire and rescue. I do wish the rest of the public sector would recognise that and take advantage of these great professional people.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. We'll just adjourn. Oh, sorry.
I think thanks for the question. I think workforce planning is really important to the service. Michelle Hickmott is the Assistant Chief Fire Officer, chairs the Workforce Planning Board. So we because of the retirement profile, we need to make sure that we're planning well ahead to make sure that that we're recruiting to the right areas at the right time, and that's really important. And I think it's also worth noting for the panel members that this is one of the areas that HMIC commented on at their recent inspection about how we have got good and robust processes in place for our workforce planning. And they also noted as well that in terms of our preparedness for future funding challenges, they noticed that we are good at that as well in terms of preparing. And I think this is really the points that we're trying to make today, really, just around being prepared for the financial challenges ahead. We've got a challenge in terms of that £1 million saving that we need to make sure that we've got a plan to deliver. But we also need to be prepared beyond that for significant challenges should they arise. So we need to make sure that we're running some scenarios and we've got some plans that are readily available. But I think just to answer your question, workforce planning is always an important subject and one that we obviously take very seriously.
Right, thank you for everybody's contributions. We'll just adjourn the meeting while we go withdraw and consider it. Okay. We've had a discussion, obviously, and we do have a concern around staffing levels and clarity on future strategic thinking. However, in view of those concerns, we are accepting and approving the report on pages 5 and 6, and formally approving them and the recommendations. Okay, if I can ask the Commissioner to talk fire safety plan.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a regular commitment. This is the what we call the Community Risk Management Plan. It was delayed for a year so that it tied in with the local fire and rescue plan refresh that I did following the election, which I think is the right thing in Commissioner governed areas. It's a really, really comprehensive piece of work, this. I'm delighted. I think there's been more consultation, more contribution from stakeholders and the public than we've ever had. I know the senior team are very, very pleased that it endorses the direction of travel. And it really does ask the public to affirm that we've got, the service has got its priorities right. Very happy to recommend it. And of course, it's a key driver for where service is provided from, the nature of that service. And I would just particularly draw attention to the fact that we are ever more keen to identify vulnerability. So where there are resources, which properties, which buildings, which locations should we be actively engaging with, which people are least likely to be able to keep themselves safe if there's a fire or an incident. And that is driving more and more what fire and rescue are doing, and I do think we'll see more of that in the Grenfell report as well. The key there, of course, is data sharing. There's a project underway at the moment across Staffordshire to try and map vulnerability, health data with other areas of community safety, and I think that's going to drive the service going forward. Where is their time best spent at reducing incidents? So very happy to recommend the CRMP to you, comprehensively consulted on, and that, along with my local fire and rescue plan, will be setting the direction for the next 4 years.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Do colleagues have any questions? Mr. Bowen.
This is a very minor question. Perhaps you can help me, please. On the progress against the recommendations, if they're completed and signed off there in green, page 6, am I on the right thing? Oh, I'm on the next one, sorry, wait a minute. Yep. I'm on, hang on.
Oh, this is to do with the national misconduct.
Yeah. Green is completed, and on track with both. We've got amber or yellow and purple. I'm just wondering what the difference is between those two colours. It's a minor point, but I'm just curious. Thank you.
Well, actually, my own view is it's quite an important point, not minor at all. You'll note that a number of the dates for completion are actually this month, and in our recent governance board, we went through these again. The majority of them are now green. We've got this workforce plan one there, number 3, which is going to come back in May. There's been these recommendations have really been quite a challenge for the sector. I think more so elsewhere than in Staffordshire, because this has been a priority piece of work for us ever since I was elected 3.5 years ago, and sometime before actually. So Staffordshire is progressing very, very quickly. Regrettably, 2 new reports last week relating to fire and rescue services in Wales indicate that the sector has still got some way to go around misconduct, and just understanding how important it is and how valuable or how much emphasis the public pay to this. So this isn't going away, and actually the next step for fire and rescue is to implement new processes for managing complaints, more independence in that and more expert advice and more monitoring of the process, which again is something that I'm very keen to do through our governance and oversight of the service.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. As a new member of this panel, I've not seen previous iterations of this report, but I presume it's iterated forward each year. How much of this report was carried out when we were on a minimum 4-rider system that has not yet been reviewed for the current staffing levels? And are we still sure that those the outcome, the reports generated are relevant?
Yes, Councillor Taylor, thank you. This report is refreshed. It's a comprehensive consultation every 4 years, typically, so not annually. It sets a direction for a term. Your point about threes is quite key. Now, I know the panel, at their request, have had a quite substantial set of papers in response to an action from prior to the finalisation of the riding in threes consultation. That and the riding in fours is referred to in the consultation question about the service employing all the means to provide firefighters in a safe way to incidents. David, are you closer to knowing exactly where that was? Because there was a key question that we were looking for endorsement for, or looking to see what the public felt and stakeholders felt in the CRMP, wasn't there? You're probably like me thinking, where was it, so we can point it out to Mr. Taylor.
I can't exactly signpost, Commissioner, exactly where that is in the report.
Chair, could we beg your indulgence, and when we find it, we'll come back to you. Might just need 2 minutes. The key question of the public was, are you comfortable that we are taking all measures to make sure that we're deploying teams as promptly and as often as we can? We will find that before the end of the meeting.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah. I would just add, I'm not going to talk too much on this one about riding in threes, but we did get quite a substantial pack about 10 minutes before the meeting. So I'd suggest we probably want to bring it back again so we can have a chance to digest that. But thank you for sending it. It's good. Yeah, I think it's a good document. I enjoyed reading it. I'd like to again just. Yeah, can you guarantee around the resources and the capabilities? I'm thinking more of these emergent risks which are outlined around cyber threats and battery storage fires. So my question is can you guarantee that the fire and rescue services have resources and capabilities to address these emerging risks, such as cyber threats and battery storage fires, without impacting frontline response times? Like I imagine it's going to...
The nature of community safety is you can never guarantee. but we're doing everything we can. The service is very much, not only does it have the workforce, the training, but it also has the equipment. We're continuing to invest in new equipment, some of which is necessary for these types of energy storage plants. You may be aware, I don't know whether you've been approached in your own division, but this is probably one of the biggest issues for local people at the moment. There are a tremendous number of planning applications going in for battery storage and PV panel energy generation. It does raise concerns. At the moment, it's with the planning authorities to consider all the building controls. Fire and rescue, their primary concern is that they can get to the site and that they can move around the site and that the site is correctly distanced from other things. Actually, that's no different from any other type of development that might go through planning. The National Fire Chiefs have established some protocols whereby fire and rescue are available to developers to consider in their planning stage that all those are being met. Most do. Most have the conversation, and most of the plans that are being presented are well considered and safe. Not all do. And in fact, not all planning authorities are making sure that happens, which concerns me. And I've been in a number of conversations with local councils about this. However, the risks are not as significant as some might feel. But the national push towards net zero is going to mean more and more of these applications coming forward. I think there's a question, and sorry just to prolong this, but it's important. Probably spent more time on this in the last 2.5 years than anything else in terms of stakeholders being concerned, and more concerned than they need to be, actually. But there's a big question as to whether fire should be statutorily asked to comment on these types of applications. I think that is a consideration for government. If they were, it would need funding because there's a big impact then on representation at planning meetings, preparing reports, and so on. I think if done well and done properly within the current regulation, it can be managed safely. But it does require both planners and developers to engage with fire and rescue.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I mean, I'm no planning expert and I'm not on planning, but I'm sure the colleagues around the room will go to their planning chairs and discuss this with them. Do you just on that? Do you think it's a training thing for planning committees to do, or do you think it's just awareness? Just thinking out loud.
It certainly shouldn't be awareness because it's part of their job and they know what their job is and they're trained. Chairman, my deputy just like to come in. I think he's been involved in some conversations very recently.
Chomping at the bit.
Thank you. I also have a councillor in Stoke still. I do have a best site just outside of my patch that's being considered at the moment. One of the points that Ben raised earlier, and Charles asked around regulation, I think that's where the government will start to have to regulate around who should be consulted when it comes to some of these up-and-coming technologies, but also how those decisions need to be taken, because as we rightly say at the minute, the fire and rescue service is consulted more around access than actually is this safe. It's actually the domain of the HSE more often than not, the Health and Safety Executive. And the National Planning Policy Framework specifically talks about how decision makers should regard regulatory processes as robust when they're taking decisions. Now, everyone will have different views on the HSE and how effective they can be. And I know certainly on planning committees I've sat on, that's been a challenge where you feel the regulation is not robust, but you've got to vote as if it were. So I think that's a challenge for local government to take forward in terms of how they are allowed to make decisions and the framework with which that works, particularly when it comes to some of these challenges and the impact it then has on the emergency services from that.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner, for clarifying that. That's very interesting. I just want to make just two points, really. I mean, firstly, Commissioner, I do think it's really encouraging earlier on when we discussed about joining up to those wider determinants for fire and community safety. I think that's great, and I know that's what we're trying to do in Cannock Chase, so that's really encouraging. I think just to go back to my question, and this will be my last one, is as we've talked about the battery store fires, but with regards to cybersecurity, and I work in a technology field some of my time, is there been any specific investments or initiatives that are going on to ensure that our fire service is robust from cyber attack? Thank you.
Yeah, as a service itself, actually part of the IT investment is around making sure everything is up to date and we've got the right protection software and so on. It's a key reason that the control centre, we share a control centre with West Midlands, all our dispatch is done from there, and there's quite a big investment over the next 5 years, about 300 grand a year, in improving the software system there. It's one of the main reasons is around ensuring its capacity to resist hackers and attacks. It's a key issue. We lost 999 into our control centre in the police for about just over 2 hours a few weeks ago. It woke everybody up. All the fail-safes worked very well. Our neighbours stepped in as they do. We occasionally step in for them as well in similar situations. But it just reinforced it's not just software. Actually, you can have a piece of kit go pong every now and again. So it is crucial. And unfortunately, there are agencies out there that would seek to undermine the UK by targeting public services, some of which are not as well protected as private organisations, regrettably. Sorry, just to come back on the question earlier, the key element in the CRMPs, page 101, now it talks more about 3 crewing than 4. 4 is really a matter for everyday monitoring. It's an established process around much of the country, the riding in 4s. And the key question there was to ask the public about how it crews. So question 10, do you agree that Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service should maximise its available resources in a flexible manner to respond to the specific needs and risks within your community? By doing this, we could increase the speed of our response. So that's essentially saying where appropriate, where safe, where the incident is the right type. Is it, do the public stakeholders think we should take those flexible choices if there's a benefit in speed of response? And the trial has absolutely proven that, as has the crewing in 4 across the piece. And Chairman, you and the panel might also be interested. There's been a piece of work done to understand the cost of the Fire Brigade Union's manifesto, which talks about always crewing in 5 and always crewing to respond within 5 minutes of any incident across the country. We've just costed that for Staffordshire. The results are quite staggering. I have shared it with the Ministerial Advisory Group, which I'm pleased to be contributing to with the new government, because I think it will qualify that actually the costs of that just mean it's impossible to achieve. But with your permission, I'd quite like to share that research with the panel for their own information, because they will, no doubt, have people wishing to converse with them about the merits of that.
Councillor Atkins.
Back in August, obviously there was a report about Staffordshire Fire and Rescue suggesting that behaviour needed to improve and talking about sort of sexism and such like. And so in the light of that, it's a little bit disappointing that the service is only achieved adequate in terms of promoting fairness and diversity. So what more is the service doing to address those issues, because clearly there was an issue back in August 2024, and clearly you've got an adequate response, an adequate judgment now, but what's being done to ensure that any last vestiges of sexism or racism is being eliminated?
Well, as I mentioned before, it might be, you might find it interesting to look at recent reports of other places, which I would suggest they need to get to adequate as fast as they can. Adequate is the expected standard. In our report in August, if you're referring to our own HMI report, I don't recall it identifying particular issues for Staffordshire. There was a report where Staffordshire were one of 10 services that contributed to a national sector report. It didn't specifically mention any service. We were happy to contribute to that. It isn't to, I'm not concerned at the moment about Staffordshire's capacity to manage correctly the concerns that you're outlining. It's been so important to us for the last 3 years to get this right and almost be a leader in this work. Our Chief Fire Officer, Rob Barber, wrote were primarily involved in writing the ethics element of the fire standards nationally. And we've tried to be at the forefront of this type of addressing what was an old-fashioned, out-of-date and totally unacceptable culture in this service. And I regret that we're still seeing reports now that suggest from bottom to top there are still issues. Where they're happening in Staffordshire, they're addressed very robustly. And I'm very pleased with the HMI report and its recommendation we mentioned earlier around more independence in managing complaints, misconduct and so on, because that's the key. It's about timely response and actually more training, more support for people at supervisor levels to deal with issues when they arise, not allowing them to progress, as you and I have seen in other services over decades. Dealing with issues sooner rather than later is the key, and some people who shouldn't be in an organisation like that, when necessary, they're removed.
Thank you.
It's just a follow up to Councillor Atkins' question. So in the document where it's, I'm trying to think what number it would be, because it's a document that's been brought in from the report. It says around the be honest and open, encouraging people to be themselves and treat each other with kindness and respect. It says, you know, and I think it's just going off what the councillor has said, is it says establishing accessible whistleblowing processes and reviewing support for individuals raising concerns, and then strengthening background checks. So my question is can you give us any more details around that, and if there is any timeframes? Because I know it's something it can be really difficult to get right in the public sector, about people feeling that they are going to be heard, but also that they can be safe and psychologically safe to whistleblow. And obviously that has then key safety concerns if that goes wrong or is not quite implemented effectively. Thank you, Commissioner.
Actually, Councillor, there's some reference in the paper later in the agenda on complaints to misconducts and so on too. My Chief Exec and I discuss all new issues of this nature in our regular 2-to-2s with the Chief Fire Officer and his deputy. I think that's unusual to take it outside of the normal governance. It's such a priority for us. The whistleblowing opportunity is there, it has been used, and actually my own view would be I'd be quite comfortable to see an increase in the number of people coming forward rather than a decrease, because it tends to suggest that there's a confidence that they can bring issues. There isn't anything substantive that concerns me at the moment in Staffordshire, but I'm very happy to come back on that particular point with a report, and perhaps we can share some of the information that goes through regular governance and I scrutinise.
Thank you, Commissioner. No, I just thought it was a good follow-up. Just to be specific, though, is there now whistleblowing service or practice in place now? Is that a formalised thing within the fire service?
Yes, it is.
Fab. Thank you.
It is, and actually, it ultimately ends up on Louise's desk. Is the formal process that we've got in place.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for clarifying that. The report is formally noted. Moving on to agenda item 7, the fire statement of assurance 2324. Can I ask you to introduce it, please?
Thank you. There's a real mass of good information. This is an annual report as opposed to a 4-year strategy. This is a report on how we're doing against the plans. It's a really comprehensive document. For anyone who's interested in understanding what Staffordshire Fire and Rescue do, where it is engaged, the priorities, the extension of the plan is mentioned there. That's the safety plan, the CRMP. And it's really, I think, delightful to see on, what page is that of the document, 13, the priorities of the plan and my own local fire and rescue plan, which represents the public's concerns, lining up. So it's a really comprehensive document. I hope you find, actually, the real value for me is it's easy to read and gives people a real sense that if they need help and support, the fire and rescue service is there to provide it. It's statutory requirement that they produce this report every year, and I recommend it to you.
Do colleagues have any questions? Councillor, Mr. Bowie.
Thank you for the report. Can I refer to item 3 on there, which is about public confidence? I think page 23 on your numbering, on ours it's page 112. From a public point of view, obviously arrival times is an absolute major one, isn't it? How long does it take for the service to arrive? And it tells us there that the average attendance time was 9.34 minutes, which is a slight improvement from the previous year. And then on the next page, it talks about the 3-person trial, 3-person crew, and says there a 3-person crew arrives 9 minutes and 45 seconds quicker than the next fully crewed ambulance. Now, I might be comparing apples and pears here, but I've struggled to relate those two statistics together.
I might do it as well at first go. I think it's because we're talking about averages, and the key with the on-call crew is the time that it would otherwise have taken a second crew to arrive in the past. David, could you just?
I think it's all to do with the incident area. So what we're saying here is where a crew of 3 has been mobilised, it's effectively meant that the response has been quicker. So it depends on so a rural, where that location or where that incident is, but we've just got basically we've got factual evidence that where we've mobilised crews of 3 that wouldn't normally have been mobilised, and they've obviously got there quicker and ahead of the main appliance. So we can check the stats, but I think it's just the type of incident, whether it's a rural or an urban incident, and the time's obviously different.
Mr. Bone, if I may, what that improvement will mean is that the overall average, the first number you mentioned, should continue to improve.
Are there any further questions? Okay, the report is formally noted. Moving on to the Police Misconduct and Complaint Regulations Annual Report. Commissioner, could you introduce it?
Thank you, Chairman. There's a lot going on today, isn't there? complaints report. This is an annual report that you receive. Interesting, I think, this is police and fire and rescue. You can see that there's slight increases in the numbers coming in. I really haven't got a problem with that at all. As long as people feel they can complain, they're actually being given the opportunity to complain. Quite often the correspondence that comes my office, through my office, I encourage people to complain. The complaints process is the basis where the organisation, both organisations, have the best opportunity to improve. So I'm not too concerned about the number of complaints. The nature of the complaints is not changing dramatically. You'll see that in the case of policing, it's primarily around being kept informed, police actions following contact information and decisions. Sometimes, I'm afraid people will always be very disappointed if what they see as a prosecutable event actually can't be prosecuted for one reason or another, or there's not the evidence to proceed with that. But information is a real key learning for the police. They're investing at the moment in new technology as well as new people to keep people updated, allow people to keep in touch with their own case, actually manage that online rather than call 101 in some situations. And I think that's going to help bring down the number of people complaining about not being kept informed, which is good news. The key measure for me is appeals. And you'll see that at 4.4 there, generally, if somebody's not happy with the outcome of a complaint, they don't feel it's a satisfactory explanation of the situation, they have a right to ask for it to be reviewed either by my office or by the IOPC, depending on the nature of the nature of the complaint. I believe if it involves a criminal aspect, then the IOPC will pick up the review. We look at the outcome, and actually those we're upholding, so about 104 reviews, appeals done by my team last year. That was about 20% of the reviews. Excuse me. 104 reviews. Just 13 were upheld, and you can see in 4.5 the nature of the reason that we agree that the complaint could have been managed better. Again, a lot of that is about the way we're communicating with the complainant. Is it quick enough? Is it clear enough? Is it in the using the method they've asked us to deal with them, rather than the outcome of the complaint? Notable, I think, that triage, which was introduced just over 2 years now, is dealing with 70% of the complaints. So an early conversation, an opportunity, in some cases, to apologise, a proper conversation with people who are not happy, is leading to a satisfactory outcome in 70% of the cases, which is good news as well. It also means people aren't into a long, protracted process. But the absolute key for me, and in fact an area where I'm not entirely satisfied at the moment, is where there's organisational learning from complaints. So whether it is communication, speed of response, clarity of response, and in some cases something more significant that might lead to a process change, is the organisation learning from that? And my team and I are doing a little more work this year through our scrutiny to just assure ourselves that organisational learning opportunities from complaints are indeed changing the way that the service might do training or disciplining of individual staff members or officers. I'd be happy to report back on that, Chairman, if you wanted later in the year when we've concluded that piece of work. Fire and rescue, the numbers are very much smaller. I think it's fair to say something goes on nationally, then there'll be more complaints into a service locally. And protests this year have led to an increase in concerns, questions about two-tier policing as a result of protests. I think are legitimate concerns. Quite often we can be satisfied very quickly. But also with fire and rescue, concerns about behaviours, misconduct, as you've pointed out yourselves, panel today, they may well lead to members of the public seeking assurance as well as making a complaint. So hopefully that's given you a sense of what's in the paper. I'm happy to take any questions related to it. And thanks to Veronica, by the way, who does a sterling job in my team. She lives this. She's a wonderful member of staff.
Thank you, Commissioner. I suppose from our perspective, before we go over to further questions, a lot of the question I was going to ask you've mostly answered, but it was like, what have the police learned from the complaints and how are they using it to improve the service?
It's the right question. I'd like almost to be able to give you a list of the key areas where the complaints process led to change, and it's what I'm looking for from this piece of work that we're going to be doing with them. I'm aware of one or two situations where, in some circumstances, quite terrible outcomes have led to a change in process. And it's not just of interest to Staffordshire. In that case, it might be of national interest around a process, or maybe a system change, information we should have known about. We didn't because a system software tweak needs to be made, something of that nature. Those are few and far between, actually. Most of the complaints are, you didn't keep me up to date, you didn't tell me X, Y, Z, I had to chase you, you were less than polite, that type of incident. You didn't explain your reason. And I think those are, for me, the reason why engagement and communication are key in my police and crime plan. I think it's the area where all police services can improve more. In some cases they do a decent job, but people don't realise because they've not been engaged in the conversation. They don't feel involved. And if you're a victim of crime, you absolutely need to know what the situation is. Notwithstanding, there are also complaints about the whole system. It's not directly in my control, the delays of in court processes, although I do my utmost. And in some cases, I think it's important that we're feeding back to the other parties as well, CPS, probation, courts, where they are not helping victims to get through their situation as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do colleagues have any questions? Oh, Mr. Bowie.
Sorry, it's me again. Don't know what I've had for breakfast this morning, but I can't stop talking. Anyway, can I talk for a couple of minutes, please, about the main complaint with the police about action or lack of action following contact? And if you can indulge me, please, in a little anecdote. Some of you may know that before police commissioners were appointed, we had police authorities. And in those days, I sat on that authority for Staffordshire. And they set up an exercise one day where a number of police, senior police people were sat round a table with a couple of members, including myself. And what we did was cold call complainants, explain the situation and gave them the opportunity to talk to a group about their discontent with police performance. And guess what was the main issue that came out of that? And I'm talking some 16, 17 years ago, lack of contact from the police. Now, it's not fair to make a direct comparison, but I can assure you that the years I've been involved with this one comes up again and again and again, and assurances are given again and again and again it'll be dealt with. And bluntly speaking, it doesn't really seem to happen. So if I seem don't want to be aggressive about this, perhaps disappointment is a better word, that this is a long-running sore that really does need dealing with. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Bone. Don't apologise, because that is exactly the nature of the most conversations I have with the public who are disappointed. Remember, I'm not the police. I'm trying to represent your views. I think they can still do better. They are doing better. There's no question they're doing better. Even some measurables like answering 101 quickly, the time it's taken to put our files together. I think we've gone from 128 days to 70 odd days in the last 12 months. That's more speedier justice for people. I think it is absolutely essential that we keep people informed and recognise the world's moved on. People, they're not waiting for letters, they're not waiting for phone calls. They are expecting social media type reactions. Your parcel carrier will tell you when the parcel's coming, and yet the police can't necessarily tell you the stage you're at with a prosecution. So it's essential that they move with the times. I'm pleased to say they are. We've invested a lot this year in a product called Salesforce. It means most people, depending on the type of incident, but they will receive, if they've said they are comfortable receiving text messages or emails, they will get a detail of their officer in charge. They'll get detail of how they can log on themselves and monitor the progress of the case. The sort of thing they've got used to in buying products, but also they get used to from good customer service. I think we've got to keep on doing that. Being informed continues to be the main issue. And thank goodness, actually, because what I would be really concerned about is if we've got lack of fairness and impartiality or use of force topping these charts. That's a problem. It's an issue if people aren't being kept up to date, but it's something we can do something about and do more about. Confidence in the service is key. So it really does matter. And I'm pleased that certainly new recruits, this is a fundamental part of their training. Keep people assured. I've got to say, when I visit my doctor, which isn't easy in the first place, and then you're following up, chasing up your own test results, or, well, what does that mean and what next? It isn't something that's unique to policing. It's a problem across a lot of public service, I think. People do the job, but they don't necessarily help you to understand what's happened so that you can be more confident yourself. But don't worry, it's not going away. It's right up there in my plan again. And until we get it right and we're one of the best in the country, it won't go anywhere.
Councillor Khan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Commissioner, on 4.4, number of reviews that have been carried out, on there, I read there's still live 3 and out of time 3. Could you explain a little as to how long these 3 lives, one in 2024, have been going on for, and the 3 out of time, what does that mean exactly?
I don't know what the actual time deadline is. I suspect that there is an expectation to fulfil an appeal as quickly as possible and a set timeline. Happy to report back on that, Councillor Khan, as to exactly which they are. Some of these reviews are quite comprehensive. The team will look at the whole, in some cases, the whole investigation. And it can take months when there's an expectation or a deadline of weeks. So it doesn't surprise me that there's a few that are still live. I note it's slightly smaller number than in the previous year. But my key concern there was that the review was getting a proper comprehensive look at rather than trying to hit the target. But could I find out for sure, and I'll come back to you. I don't think there's another reference in the report to that.
Would be lovely. I would welcome the update on it. My concern is that weeks and months I can understand a review can take, but not years.
Yep.
If it's taken years, then there's something wrong, and we need to put that right.
Yep.
And the last one is the upheld 13. What was the consequences of them 13 being upheld complaints?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Khan, that was my reference earlier to the point 4.5 just below. So of those 100 reviews, the 15 which were not upheld, these are the nature of the recommendations to the service. So in the main there, you can see that they are around the actual process, the nature of the communication, but also things like ensuring all allegations raised by the complainant are addressed. So somebody's complained about 3 things and the complaint team have gone back to answer 2, not all 3. It's not acceptable. Answer all 3. So it's the nature of that as set out in 4.5 below.
Which is understandable, but
Yeah.
12% in 2023, 13 in 2024.
Yeah.
So
please.
where are we learning and improving? Say, come next year, if the numbers are still about the same, then all these recommendations below that you have highlighted there, it tells me that we are not improving or learning anything from these complaints that have been raised and been reviewed overall. So it would be nice to see some improvement.
Yes.
Over the years to say, right, yeah, we learned something in 23, something in 24, 25, here are the improvements. The numbers are clearly going down, and especially the length of time is more concerning for me. For some individuals to be waiting on an outcome of a complaint for years is not acceptable.
No. By the way, I'm not. I don't know whether anybody's waiting years. I don't think those 3 live ones. Some of those might be only a days or months, but I'll confirm that to you. I think it's a good challenge actually about the trends, the number of recommendations, and how often they've had to be made year on year. Of course, when you've got a service with the amount of turnover that we've had, particularly of officers, with a third more officers, and as people retire than being replaced, there's always new individuals to make the same old mistakes. That's just human nature. But the more training that's being done, the more intervention, it would be really welcome to see a reduction in trend. So I'm going to ask if we can get a bit more historical data to refer to there.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner. I've noted on the report that it doesn't include any demographic breakdown of complainants or officers. And I know that public confidence is one of your priorities. So I always feel that transparency is key to ensuring that fairness. So my question is that an omission, or will you commit to have that demographic data in future reports so we know that the complainants and the officers, there's no sort of patterns there? Does that make sense? Is it actually? Do you report demographics for complaints, or are they just not being reported here?
I believe we do, but I'll check. In fact, one of the key measures, and we do this on our surveying as well, is around ensuring that people from different backgrounds feel fairly treated, and we do quite well on that in Staffordshire. In fact, very well. On being fairly treated. But I will ask the question around the demographics of complainants. And when you say demographics, age, ethnicity, gender, etc.
Yeah, so yeah, I think in the report, there's no real clear way for us to assess whether certain groups have faced some barriers in the complaints process, or that, on the flip side, police officers have appropriately been affected by misconduct outcomes. So it's just that enhanced clarity. You know, if you don't report it, if you don't record it, then you can't report it. But if you do, it would enhance the report.
It does. I'm pretty sure we do record it. And in fact, the IOPC also record that type of information because they're the ones who are looking to compare forces with forces. So I'll see if I can produce or share some of that detail.
Excellent, yeah.
In fact, we may well call on the IPC report or give you a reference to that.
No, excellent. And it might just be a way of improving it, you know, in the future. I think you referenced Veronica, so she's probably your data person, so I'm sure she's all over it. It was just a, I didn't know if it, yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks for that clarification.
It's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Could I also add that it would be quite useful, obviously, I'm assuming that gender will be included there, but actually it would also be important to note the gender and the ethnicity of the officer being complained about.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. The contents are formally noted. We're now moving on to agenda item 9, the reappointment of Panel Co-optee, Mr. Bowen. Is everyone in agreement with the reappointment? Yeah, okay. So, Mr. Bowen, you're reappointed for a further 4 years. Okay. So we're now moving on to agenda item 10, questions to the PFCC by panel members. Do any panel members have a question for the PFCC?
I do, but if we're going to discuss the 3-person cruise at another later date, I can reserve my question or comment to then. Chair.
I think that'd probably be better because it gives us a chance to read that report, doesn't it?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for
Okay.
that clarification.
Okay, dates of future meetings and work programme. We have got a meeting scheduled in for next Monday, 17th the 2nd, but we can cancel that as the precept has been agreed.
Just to mention that your next meeting is the 14th of April. At the moment, there isn't any business scheduled. It's good practice to keep the date, just in case anything urgent comes up. But if nothing does, then we'll be cancelling that about a week before the meeting, if that's okay with the panel.
All right. I'm not aware of any exclusion of the public items. The meeting can be closed at, what's this, 11:54. Thank you.